I normally don't make content like this, but for a new Mario theatrical movie, this is an exception. Everyone that watches me is going to want to know my opinion about this, so I want to put my thoughts out there so I'm not continually asked. Another thing, this is an opinion video, not a reaction video. I'm not going to do that stuff where I'm on screen yelling or crying or whatever cheap clickbait YouTube expects. People like to joke about how I play some of the same retro games over and over. Things like Contra, Castlevania, Mega Man, and Zelda are all classics, so of course I'm going to come back to those whenever I have an excuse to. As much as I'm known for playing Zelda games, honestly, I've probably done more Mario streams than anything else. Mario has always been a big part of my life. Of course, there was the Super Mario Bros. Movie from the 1980s that was bad when it came out, but since has become more of a cult classic with its own set of fans. When that movie was new, though, I just remember that everybody complained about it. That it wasn't anything like what people expected it to be. Judging by this trailer, it seems like we might get something more along the lines of what we imagined it was going to be back then. The elephant in the room here, though, is Mario's voice. They aren't using Charles Martinet, who has been the voice of Mario since the Nintendo 64 era. They decided to go with Chris Pratt, who they say is basically just using his own voice, I guess. It seems kind of like what they did with Detective Pikachu, where they gave Pikachu a new voice. Some people say that they needed to do that because it's a 2-hour movie, and you can't have Pikachu doing his own high-pitched voice for 2 hours, but they certainly made plenty of Pokemon shows and movies that work just fine. So I don't know what's up with this recent trend of giving them all really basic, boring voices. People have a lot of feelings on this, and everybody's entitled to feel how they want, but you're here for my opinion, right? So I'll say what I prefer. And I've always been mostly a fan of the NES and Super Nintendo games when it comes to Mario. And back then, he didn't have a voice at all in the games. But for cartoons and movies, of course he needs to have one. I'll tell you how I would have gone about it. I'm personally a fan of the early black and white Mickey Mouse cartoons, specifically from the 1930s. Once 1940 hit, the Mickey cartoons took a nosedive in quality, in my opinion. Anyway, the reason I bring this up is because in the early Mickey cartoons, he does speak, but very little. I would have personally kept Charles Martinet's Mario voice, but just had him not speak very much, and made the movie more visual, like a Roadrunner cartoon, where it's about the action and the visuals. As far as the trailer itself and what's happening, I didn't mind it. The 3D animation looks well done, and I like 3D animation, but of course it makes me a little bit sad that everything has to be 3D these days, and very little is made in 2D. I don't see why we can't live in a world where we get an equal amount of both 2D and 3D animated movies, but that's just me. At least HBO Max made those new Looney Tunes cartoons in a more classic looking style, and I was really happy about that. I like the idea of Bowser attacking that Ice Kingdom and taking it over, giving you this foreboding sense that Bowser is gradually taking over and the Mushroom Kingdom is gonna be next. That's about as classic of a setup as you can do, and I like that about it. By the way, when Bowser gets the star, is that supposed to be like he's getting an Infinity Stone? I'm kinda hoping that's not where they're going with that. Like if Bowser gets all the stars and he's unstoppable or whatever. Because then it seems like they're just going to be copying Marvel, so hopefully that's not what that is. I like Spider-Man and X-Men and all that stuff, but I'm personally just extremely burnt out on everything related to superheroes. I'd be more than fine if this kind of takes over for a while, and there's a few big Nintendo movies like this instead. But it also doesn't need to go on forever. I hope they make 2 of these and then stop. The problem with these mega franchises is that they don't know when to quit. For example, I like Toy Story, but we definitely didn't need that 4th one. Judging by the trailer, the plot might be basic, but I'm okay with that. Only because we've never gotten a proper, basic, theatrical Mario movie. Nintendo seems to have a pretty good idea of what people want to see when it comes to Mario these days. If you look at pictures or video of Super Nintendo World in Universal Japan, you can see that they have it themed in a very classic Mario style. They didn't make the mistake that Disney did with Galaxy's Edge, which could have been Hoth, Tatooine, and the Death Star, but instead they made some gross town that looks like it's covered in dirt and filth. Nintendo understands appeal, something that Disney has totally forgotten. It's the same problem those Michael Bay TMNT movies had. Those turtles looked awful. The turtles are supposed to be appealing to look at. Look at how great they looked in the 1990 film. Michael Bay wanted them to be realistic turtles. That's not what they should be. And with the recent Pinocchio, they made Jiminy Cricket look like a real cricket. Nobody wants that. Ward Kimball understood how to draw an appealing character, and Nintendo gets it too.